This is Vicki Woodyard. Vernon Howard was my teacher, and Vernon Howard took me out of this world. Cleanly, completely, totally, for all time. My ego hates that. What Vernon Howard did was to establish a witness in us that was not of the world, not of the ego, because the ego is a mechanical thing and the world runs mechanically. Consciousness is something altogether different. Consciousness is your true nature. In non-duality, they talk about seeing the true as true and the false as false. But Vernon Howard laid down the law. There was no escape. If you could hear him, if you had ears to hear Vernon Howard, you knew that he meant it. He meant business, and he would hit his fist on that table, and he would dare you to argue with him. He brooked no arguments because arguments are intellectual. They're egocentric. So when you sat in Vernon Howard's class, you surrendered. You stopped on a dime. And his true students honored that. They honored that. And the minute they left the grounds, the building that Vernon ran, we all forgot about it and tried to return to our former state. But Jesus said, "Behold, I make all things new." That's what a Vernon Howard in your life will do for you. He will rip the old out from under you until your ego doesn't have a place to stand. Does it hurt? Hell yeah. The sign over his hall said, "When the pain gets too bad, come back." Because you see, we're all suffering 24/7. Christ suffered consciously. Vernon Howard came to teach us consciousness. He came to teach us, I am that I am. You see that you can't have it your way and God's way. It's God's way or the highway. You have to make a decision, and Vernon Howard knew that, and he brought us to that decision point in every talk he gave. And if you listen to him on YouTube, talks made 35, 40 years ago, the sheep that are of his flock hear his voice. They hear it in Portugal, they hear it in the United States, they hear it in Australia. He used to have people visit Boulder City where he lived. They would come from all over the world and stay there for a month or 3 months. When they were there, they had to work. They had to go to work parties. They had to help the print, publish, and deliver his books. They had to keep the facility clean. They had to do their inner work. It was all too much for the ego. And so most people fled. I wanted to flee. I would go back to my motel room and sob at my weakness. But Vernon wanted me to see that, as Jesus said, my strength is made perfect in weakness. Now, when I write, I sort of write that way. You know, I say, look, I'm not fooling around with you. I buried a 7-year-old daughter. I buried a 63-year-old husband. I have been through the mill. I have hung in there with the tough teachings. I do not have a social life, but I have a great inner life. Not all the time, because my ego is still with me. You can't get rid of the ego. You can't kill it. But you can learn to gather energy, as Vernon said. Gather energy when you have no problems. I know how to sit in silence and let all of my problems go. Vernon said a good prayer is, God help me right now. Because you can't work on yourself yesterday or tomorrow, only now. Thanks for listening. Namaste.